Hello and welcome back to another exciting podcast episode of American Pylon. Your host here, Will Mehall, joined by the usual counterparts, James Thomas Fanning IV, Tyler Combs, and producer Dave behind all the tech making this possible. Want to thank you again for joining us, and we want to start by giving a shout out to our new headline sponsor, Ed Freeman, who we were all able to catch up with over the weekend as he was in Athens with all of us. So we wanted to give a shout out to Ed. Ed Freeman, State Farm, talked about him on the show before. Definitely the best agent in the state, if not the country. So if you've got a boat, a life, a car, or a house, be sure to look up Ed for all of your insurance needs. All right. So I don't think there's any surprise about what we're going to talk about on this episode. It's really going to come down to the Notre Dame versus Georgia game here, and we all attended, I think, except for Dave this past week. And Dave was out on a cruise, were you not?
Yeah.
Yep, I was out there.
Where were you?
He came back,
Wow.
too. Look at him.
Middle of the ocean.
How was that?
Did you get to watch the game?
Yeah, we made it back in time to watch the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just you guys or the whole
Did you watch
boat?
it like in Miami or on the boat?
No, I mean, I was home watching the game.
Oh,
I made it all the way back.
All the way back.
All the way, yeah.
To our studio.
But yeah, went to Key West, Bahamas.
How was the cruise? Did you guys do like excursions?
No,
Stuff like that?
actually, a lot of people that had excursions got canceled because the weather was so bad in Nassau.
Really?
Yeah, like from the hurricane and stuff, there was still just like seaweed in the water and rocks that were being washed up and
Ew.
Seaweed in the ocean.
yeah.
Can you
Gross.
imagine?
I mean,
is
I
the
went to the
worst.
Bahamas to see clear water, and I got seaweed, but I'm not trying to complain. Other people don't have houses, so
Should have gone to Columbia.
First world problems, yeah. Cool. Well, I know the rest of us were actually down there attending the game, and we were hosted by the Ericksons, so huge thank you to the Ericksons for having us over to their home there in Athens near 5 Points. What did you guys think of the pregame atmosphere? That's kind of something I wanted to kick off. I mean, obviously I had a great time, but what did you guys think of the scene around Athens?
It was great. Tyler probably saw more of downtown than I did. I went downtown early with Alan Carroll so he could pick up a ticket that he was buying off somebody off Facebook. So we were downtown about 9 a.m. or so.
Okay.
Ate breakfast down there, wandered around, had a drink, just were kind of taking it in. But it was pretty low-key that early because I think the real fans that were going to make a whole day of it were set up tailgating. And then I'm sure downtown I know it was insane after the game. I'm sure it got pretty wild as it got closer to game time. But most of my day was spent at the Ericksons at 5 Points. But I think Tyler bounced around a little more.
We kind of had the same, yeah. We got to bounce around and see a few tailgates because everyone was tailgating. It was a big event, big game, so everyone wanted to get in on the action and kind of host something themselves or have a really overblown tailgate, which was fun. So the fiance and I kind of bounced around, kind of similar to Jimmy. Started a little later downtown in the morning, made sure we stopped by a few spots. We wanted to get a drink at some local watering holes that we like to visit, and had brunch down there and hung out. But it was fun. I mean, I didn't notice that it was too overly crowded to start. I did think there was a little bit buzz in the air. Walking around North Campus and such, saw a lot more green, blue, and gold, which was fun to see. The Notre Dame fans kind of taking in the campus and checking out downtown early, just kind of sticking their nose and seeing what the Classic City has to offer. But there was definitely a buzz in the air. It was fun. It was exciting. Thankfully, traffic wasn't bad on the way into Athens. Not that anyone wants to hear about traffic on a game day. But, really enjoyed it. The Ericksons, again, obviously did a great job hosting us, having a lot of us guys that went to college together and getting to hang out, getting the old band back together and getting to hang out and watch some of the earlier games during the day. And then, I got to bounce around for some other tailgates around North Campus mainly to just say hey to everyone that had made the I guess what do you call losing my word here, pilgrimage back to Athens.
There it is.
For the big game.
Nice.
So what about you, Will? You did I know actually Will got some cool footage for the weekend before the game.
So Natalie and I drove down, got into Athens probably around like 8:30, 8:45. This is actually her first time in Athens, so I wanted to make sure that she got to kind of see the layout of downtown, and then also what the hell is that?
That's producer Dave's dog's tail.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I was wondering what was going on.
There she goes. Dang, that thing is powerful. All right.
So yeah, we walked around downtown, and I kind of showed her where everything was at, and then we took a walk through North Campus, which was awesome. I mean, that's I would say probably by far the prettiest part of Georgia's campus.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's great for everybody to be able to see that. And we actually just happened to stop and talk to this family that had come down for the game from Notre Dame. and they were just saying how amazing they thought the campus looked and how beautiful it was. And I asked them, I said, how has everybody been, like, as far as the interaction with Georgia fans? And they said, well, it's really been great. And we actually kind of saw that it seemed like there was a kind of a grassroots effort to make sure that people were reciprocating the hospitality that Notre Dame fans had shown Georgia a couple of years ago when we went up. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to take in before the game. As Tyler mentioned, I brought down a GoPro and a drone to like film some cool footage. So I'm going to try and like splice that stuff together, just with like some aerial shots of the game day going on. So, but other than that, yeah, I mean, it was a blast, and I had a great time prior to the game. And then as everything kind of got closer to game time, I think around 6 o'clock, everyone sort of split their ways. And I headed downtown. I know you guys had tickets, so give me a little bit of insight as far as pregame and then the stadium atmosphere when you guys got there. What was that like?
I'll tell you, I was most impressed with, which now that I look back at it, I'm not really shocked, but at the time I was caught off guard with how packed the stadium was early on. I think the fiance and I got in probably 45 minutes before kickoff, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and it was slammed.
Wow.
Which really added to it, because now like every little pregame cheer that you kind of miss, the younger fans really going for to get the fanfare, everyone's cheering. The student section is already rocking. They're playing music. The guys on the field are bebopping around and having a good time. Like, you could just tell the energy was there. People wanted to get there early, wanted to see it, didn't want to fight any line. So that was fun to see us really show out, just really to show Notre Dame when they were warming up, like, this is what we're walking into. So that was fun. But yeah, I mean, I guess seeing the pregame rituals and all that, the flyover, all that leading up was super cool. It was actually a lot more black than I thought it was going to be in the stadium. I know Jimmy kind of called it out with posting our last episode about the fake news blackout that the Spike Squad called for, which everyone's kind of indifferent on. We don't have to spend too much time on that. But I was surprised how black it was, although it was still pretty much 50-50 in my opinion. After everything was said and done, everyone was inside the stadium. It was still, I would say it's still majority red.
50,
it looked.
I thought red, but maybe red just pops more.
Well, I think that I knew
stadium.
Jimmy was a couple of sections down from me. I could see him, so I think your angle was more towards the alumni, so you could see more of the older fans that wear red, stick the traditional.
The wine and cheese fans.
I definitely was angled more towards the students, who obviously were very decked out in black. So it was fun to see. I mean, I think it still looked very good, and then obviously all the other fanfare that went into it that we can get into later. But building up to the game, super fun. Love the buzz. Everyone was getting excited. Just every little commercial that would go on during the games that we were watching earlier, like Tennessee and Florida, would just it would just have the mention of Georgia. That was just it was really giving me chill bumps, just getting ready for what was coming. And then College game day being there, didn't get to catch any of that. That's beer drinking time, so I'd try to stick to that. But it was, I mean, with everything going on in College game day, that was just a super, super fun atmosphere, and it's going to be kind of a little disappointing, I guess, for every other home game that's not going to quite live up to that. To that hype.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool atmosphere before the game. I've never seen the stadium that full at kickoff, much less I was in there about 30 minutes early as well. So it was super high energy. Everybody was definitely buzzing. I was really proud of our fan base. Even though the tickets were $1 zillion, it seems like all the Georgia fans that sold them at least made an effort to sell them to other Georgia fans, because it felt like I think there was more orange last year for the Tennessee game,
really,
than there was this year for Notre Dame. I don't know. Maybe their dark blue blended in with some of our fans' black. So I was really just looking at the green, but I felt like our fan base did an amazing job of holding on to those tickets. That stadium was super, super loud, is we can talk about more once the game actually started. But the pregame was, shoulder to shoulder, nowhere to move. 30 minutes before kickoff. I think the student section somehow got too full. We had a freshman come over and say to us, we happen to have an empty seat next to us. And he was like, they let me in the stadium, but they won't let me in the student section. So can I stand by y'all? So I didn't get his name, but I think he's from Bainbridge. He really knew his stuff. He would have been good on the podcast.
Yeah.
But like shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, I can tell you just from seeing it on TV, it didn't look like Notre Dame had much of a presence just from what you could eyeball. But
they were loud for how many there were.
Really?
They did a good job.
Mm-hmm. The ones that were there, cheering "Let's Go Irish" when they were on third down, they were making the noise they could, and you could hear them. They were cheering. It certainly had to be. I'm sure it caught the players' ear a little bit. Nothing deafening that was going to impact the game like we did for them. when they were on offense. But the fans that were there were loud and they cheered as best they could. I mean, it was, like I said, I didn't really interact with the Notre Dame fans, unfortunately. When Jimmy and I went up 2 years ago, we actually went to a Notre Dame tailgate with people that were all our age. So we had a lot better interaction as far as, mingling and having to kind of assimilate with everyone our age and kind of, make friends at the tailgate.
Sure.
They were treated very well. I unfortunately didn't really get a chance to.
Alan and I, on our way into the stadium, we walked around the backside, kind of by the student section, past like Rutherford Hall and stuff. And we walked through some tailgates, and we're just kind of mingling with some Notre Dame fans. So they all said what Will had said, that everybody had been really nice. But
Good.
It would have been fun if we could have interacted with them a little more. But we were at Cole's house. There were some Notre Dame fans there. I felt like were treated pretty well, and they were having a good time. There were a lot of the ones I met were actually from Atlanta, which I guess kind of makes sense because Notre Dame is such a national fan base.
Yeah, Atlanta, a huge transplant city. Makes sense. I mean, it was wild. I didn't even know, but my uncle came down with a group of people from South Bend.
Okay.
And so I was hanging out with them for a while when we eventually made it downtown. And was having some conversation with those guys. They said nothing but great things, and then I think I may have alluded to it prior to the show or whatever, but posted on Reddit onto Notre Dame's football page and asked that question, and there was a lot of good feedback. So I would say that the Georgia faithful did a great job overall in reciprocating that hospitality, which is always great to hear. I don't know when we'll see those guys again, but it was just great to have that kind of experience back and forth.
And I think it's one of those things where just like 2 years ago, we'll kind of sort of continue to root for each other for the rest of the year because it makes both of our schedules look better.
For sure.
So it's like the UGA Notre Dame bromance.
Yeah. It's
Chapter 2.
This is a fun, I'm not going to say rivalry, but it is a fun relationship to have.
Yeah.
Yes, with this fan base, which is like with our first national championship being tied with them, or second rather, but most recent, unfortunately, being tied to Notre Dame, and then the awesome historical trip up to South Bend with how our fan base went, and then that special year, and then this year again, them coming to Athens, first time ever, very rare occurrence with all the hype that came around it with the rankings and everything. It's kind of a fun, super rare matchup that I would love to see a lot more regularly. I know that would diminish maybe the special. It would definitely diminish, I guess, how special and rare it is for sure. But that's something I could definitely get used to, is going back up to South Bend and seeing that and having them come here. Because seeing those gold domes and the helmet and on the field and everything was fun. It's when you watch it on TV too, and that's a classic uniform that you don't get to see that often. And seeing it right there in your backyard in your own home stadium was really a treat. So shout out to UJ Athletics for scheduling
that.
Yeah, for sure.
Fun.
Well, let's go ahead and get into the game. We're going to talk about really focusing on Georgia and looking at their offense for starters. The one thing that I want to kind of kick this off with is focusing on the first half, and particularly to begin with looking at the run. From what I can remember and from, having gone back through and watching the highlights, it just didn't look like they were getting a big push up front on that run. I mean, when you look at the stats after the fact, it kind of tells a little bit of that tale. I mean, they were averaging just like around 4.5 yards per carry, and they weren't gashing them like I think a lot of us were expecting to. I mean, I know personally, I was expecting our line to just absolutely dominate. I mean, they had more success going up the middle, but they were really containing the edge. What did you guys think? I mean, is that a red flag for Georgia going forward, that they weren't able to impose their will more effectively there?
I wouldn't call it a red flag. The first thing I would say about Notre Dame is I think they played their A++ game. I mean, I don't know if we beat them if that game's away from home. I think the crowd was super into it. They were super jacked coming in. They didn't miss hardly any tackles. They didn't miss assignments. I mean, they played as good a game as they could. They played above their talent level, and we managed to escape with the win. I think that in the first half, it seemed like we were committed to the run, whether it was we don't trust our wide receivers yet, so we just want to stick to the run game, or we wanted to wear them down the way Kirby likes it. But we were going to run the ball come hell or high water, and there were plays where they had 7-8 guys in the box. So I mean, you can have an all-pro NFL offensive line out there, and if you got 5 linemen trying to block 8 defenders, I mean, guys are going to make plays if they're not blocked. So it was frustrating at first. I know Tyler and I were sitting in Magnolia's afterwards, just kind of almost saying it felt like almost a hollow win, because we were like, what, we didn't do what we normally do, being Georgia in the first or the second half. But looking back at it, I think that Notre Dame completely sold out to stop what we do best, and we were very stubborn to move away from that, and we still managed to, chip away at it, and our best was able to beat their best.
So that's what I was going to say. It's like, if you see that, right, if they're stacking the box the way they are, and they're committed and, almost selling out to stop the run, if the coaches trust Fromm like they say they do, I understand that Notre Dame's secondary is a force to be reckoned with, but wouldn't you have expected there to be a little bit more of a mid to long ball range throws that we would have seen more in the first half? Tyler, don't you think that we would have seen more of that? I know they switched a little bit more in the second half to that and opened it up, but why do you think we didn't see that in the first?
I think if you go back and watch a lot of our earlier games versus Vanderbilt on the road, nothing like, it wasn't really an away environment, but playing against Vanderbilt, playing against Murray State, playing against Arkansas State, you saw us attack the edge very early, and that worked, and that opens the box, that spreads the box out without having to throw a lower percentage ball versus a better secondary. On top of that, Notre Dame, all we heard about was their edge rushers and how they were going to get after the quarterback. We trust our offensive line. I think with all that being said, before you have to put yourself or Fromm in that situation, we tested it. We came out very early. You saw the first 2 quick passes to Demetrius Robertson to get the ball moving. I think we tried to come out and honestly throw to open up the run initially. And some of it worked, some of it didn't. A lot of our side-to-side, a lot of our checkdowns, our screens, to Jimmy's point, they were tackling very well. I don't think Notre Dame missed a tackle, at least not in that first half.
They put on a clinic, and we feast on missed tackles, especially with DeAndre Swift. He's so hard to tackle for the first guy to tackle.
Spring it, yeah.
That took away a major X factor of our offense.
So you play this behind the line of scrimmage ball where you're throwing some screens, some real quick, check downs to the wide or to the running backs, and you're not picking up that yardage. You're already going to have second and long, third and long, which plays into Notre Dame's strengths. They have strong defensive ends that get after the quarterback. They have a lengthy, tall, athletic secondary that we probably did not give enough credit to because I really guess it hinges on we couldn't get the perimeter going. We really didn't seal the perimeter very well. You can go back and watch a few plays when we ran some sweeps, ran some quick passes. Eli Wolf, Charlie Warner, great blockers, still good, still really good blockers, just inconsistent. Maybe weren't used to the level of competition quite yet, caught by surprise, and they had some players that slipped inside and just really busted our plays. And because that couldn't open up, they didn't have to respect us. Their secondary was preventing us from owning the edge, so therefore they didn't have to relinquish all the bodies they had in the box. So it never opened up for our running game, which was frustrating because I know we think we do have elite talent. We did not have consistently elite play this week with our offensive line just because it's a numbers game. You have 5 guys. If they're going to put 7, 8 in the box, which they did, go back and look. They are begging us to throw, and when we did, their secondary made the play. So that's just very frustrating. So hats off to Notre Dame for playing pissed off and eliminating any ability for us to get outside of running it down their throat. So that was tough. And then also, if you look at Solomon Kinley going down and getting hurt and having to put Justin Schaefer in at left guard. With
Kinley's
Isaiah Wilson,
one of our best run blocking.
Yep. So left guard went down, Solomon Kinley, and then Isaiah Wilson, our right tackle, was already out. So you guys have, we trust all those guys, but still, it just doesn't help you. And now you really feel a little handicapped because you're going into a game plan where you don't have all of your starting pieces. You have pieces you trust, but aren't the guys you trust fully, and then nothing on the outside is working. So I do agree. I think Fromm can do it. It's just when those guys aren't breaking tackles, you don't want to put Fromm in position early on to get a sack or to force a ball when you don't have to. We have their horses to run it out, grind it out, which is what you saw again. It was almost just like the 2017 game, if you ask me, offensively. I remember I kept asking in 2017, where's Fromm or where's Chubb? Like, why isn't Chubb playing? Like, why aren't we moving the ball? This is where I think the frustration comes from our fan base on offense, especially early on, which Will was referring to specifically here, is just we seem to just become a shell of ourselves. We seem to just really get scared, play it very conservative, see what works by trying this one play, trying that one play, and then if we don't quite see that early success, we'll just hold on to it, shorten the clock, and then we'll get there into the fourth quarter and wear them down, which is,
that was our plan.
What we came into. And it's hard to watch. As a fan,
happened.
And I get it, top 10 matchup with that kind of environment at home, you want to come out and step on their throat and go. Like when we got the ball, after stopping them, I think they went then they ran 6 plays. It wasn't a 3 and out, but we stopped them that first defensive drive or offensive drive. We get the ball, and then we didn't do anything with it. That's frustrating, especially at home. It was our first offensive drive this year that we have not scored. In the first 3 games, we scored on every time we got the ball first. So, and then being at home, it was just, it was frustrating, especially with everything we've heard. But again, they were begging us to put it on the perimeter and have them beat us.
It seemed like we were very reluctant to let anybody that was not an upperclassman touch the ball. So it hurt Jake Fromm in that most of our receivers are younger, so we kind of refused to throw the ball. But then, Cager was kind of the player of the game at wide receiver, and he's a grad transfer senior. And then Zamir White didn't even get a carry. George Pickens didn't get a target until like the fourth quarter. So it seemed like the coaches, almost the first 3 games, they've been letting all these freshmen bust out because we've almost been, playing with our food or whatever you want to call it. And then we went back super conservative in this game, and we were like, we're not going to give. We trust Swift, we trust the offensive line, we trust Harrion, and we trust Fromm to throw it to older wide receivers.
Yeah,
and so that seemed to be what we do. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to kind of the fun and gun that we saw the first 3 against our next few games, because I think we have a reasonable stretch coming up, then a bye, then it gets tricky. Then it gets hard again.
Yeah, I've heard that argument myself. It's a little frustrating to hear. They say, we only trusted upperclassmen. If you look at ultimately, Cager is an upperclassman, Charlie Warner is an upperclassman, Eli Wolf, even though he's new, upperclassman, Demetrius Robertson, however you want to look at it, upperclassman. They're all upperclassmen. And I understand he's not, we lost a lot at receiver last year. Jeremiah Holloman leaving because he got suspended, is not ideal. I get that. We don't have all this familiarity, and I get what Jimmy's saying, and I get that argument is, well, let's just refer back and not put ourselves in a situation by forcing something to a receiver, but maybe we can't trust. He's not going to run the right route and put us in a bad position. I get that. That's the game you do. You can't just always hope they look great versus the Vanderbilts, versus the Murray States, versus the Arkansas. That is the game where they have to grow. And I understand that's a risk, and it's easy for me to say sitting here as an armchair quarterback. But those are the games those kids come here to play. And you don't just throw it to them just to appease them. But if you want to see some growth and you really want them to go up there and earn it and be a threat, you have to do that, or you're handicapping yourself. And I know Kirby knows that. I'm not telling a coach anything he hasn't ever heard before as far as criticism. But as a fan, it's just – throw it to the kid. Get him in there.
Yeah.
Make them respect. Make this okay. I've seen this kid make catches. I've heard of that hype. At least if you don't want a decoy, I don't care. You gotta trust. You gotta at least let the go. You gotta let the Joes go out there. You gotta trust your kid eventually. And I just don't like the argument of let's only trust him in the games that feel comfortable until maybe he's an upperclassman. Now is the time to win. Now,
I don't think it's that. I think if this game was in like week 12, it would be different. It's just still so early in the season, and I think that, because however you feel about it, it worked. We won.
Yeah, we won.
But I think that's why you did, I think we looked at them on film and we said, you know what, they're going to load up and try and stop the run. I think that we can still beat them. I trust Swift and Harrion to not fumble, to, not lose yards dancing around, to do what needs to be done. And then I think at the end, I don't want to call it panic from Kirby, but we did give George Pickens a few 50-50 targets there at the end, because that might have been when we were like, this game plan that we had, we're not lining up and just beating them the way we thought we would. So maybe we do need to your point, do a little more of what you're saying. But Kirby was very much, it seemed like, going to say, our best versus your best, and we're going to do it till you stop us.
I think one thing that was concerning for me was the short yardage situation, 4th and 1 on the Notre Dame, I think it was like their 26, 27-yard line with 7 minutes left to go. And instead of going and trying to pick up that first down and put the game away, they kicked the field goal. So for me, it's like, if our run game is supposed to be as dominant as it is, and you trust your guys up front, why wouldn't you give them that chance to pick up the first down?
Yeah, I was upset about that in the moment, and at the end of the day, though, if you look at the dynamic it created, that was the right decision, because once Notre Dame scored their last touchdown and then they got the ball back down 6, it forced them to go for a touchdown. Because if we had not kicked the field goal, not converted there, now they're down 10, and they probably would have been able to kick a field goal and force overtime in that last drive, and you never know what's going to happen. So, it would be fun if we had gone for it, and I think that would have been the step on their throat and end it with 7 minutes left that Tyler's talking about. I guess, Kirby's there at practice every day, and we've seen on game day how much we've struggled with those short yardage stuff, and we have a top 3 kicker in the country. So
yeah,
I was frustrated about it in the moment, but when I've gone back and tried to read more about it and looked at it from a momentum standpoint, from a field position standpoint, from a clock standpoint. I think Kirby was saying if we can force them into a position where they absolutely need 2 touchdowns to win, I trust our defense to not give up 2 touchdowns and win now more than I trust them to not give up a touchdown and a field goal and let it go to overtime. I guess was his logic.
I think a lot of the frustration comes from who Notre Dame is. I think we all like to give crap to Notre Dame because they've always not always in recent memory they've laid eggs in what you would consider every big game they've played in, aside from these Georgia games, right? I mean, we want to be a part of those programs, like when Alabama absolutely embarrassed them in 2012.
I think that
Clemson embarrasses them in the playoffs. So we all want a piece of that because we all love to say how Notre Dame doesn't belong. They shouldn't be in the playoffs. They don't play anybody. We want to be a part of that team that just buries them and puts them away. And that just simply isn't the case. And I understand the argument of, well, it's week 4. You have to – you're not the team that you were. And I struggle. I go back and forth with this argument myself because – yeah, let's say, if we were the week 14 team, week 12 team, week 11 team playing Notre Dame, that Notre Dame team that was playing Clemson last year was a week 14 Notre Dame team, and that was a week 14 Clemson team. That was the result. So I understand, okay, well, why can't we do that? Why can't Georgia be that program? They just absolutely bust it wide open. And we have the Joes. We've out-recruited them. We've lapped them in recruiting. We're at home. We're at this environment. So I understand that frustration. It's just... I think at the end of the day, it just left something to be desired with whether you call it schematically or whatever or
killer instinct.
Yeah, I don't know. We do seem to lack that, and I think it's a mixture of both. We want to join the club that puts and embarrasses Notre Dame and be considered one of the elite programs that is without a shadow of a doubt within the conversation of the playoffs. And then on the second fold, I forget my second point that I was going to make.
I can hop in then because I agree with your point about that was week 14 teams playing each other. My argument to that would be if you look historically, the time seems to favor the more talented team. It seems like at the beginning everybody's figuring it out. Even when you look at these dream teams that professional teams put together, they get better as the season goes on. So I don't disagree with that argument that why does Clemson get a pass because it was week 14 because it was also Notre Dame's week 14. But I think. Whichever team is just more talented, has bigger, stronger guys, is going to, everybody's closer to their ceiling by week 14. So whoever has the higher ceiling is going to be the better team. Whereas I'm a big, if you listen to the show, I'm a big bye week guy. I think a lot of lights come on during the bye week. Guys get healthy. That's when teams really hit their stride. So to me, any game before the bye week, the playoff rankings haven't come out yet. The AP ranking doesn't mean anything. It's just survive and advance. So I would have liked it to be a little prettier, but I do think that, when you look at it, the glass half full way to look at it is Notre Dame, a top 10 team, came out and played just their A++ game, and we came out there and just really didn't play that well, and we won. So how good can this team be if we hit our stride in week 14?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point. I think if you really slow down and just compartmentalize this game, let's just look at us. Forget Notre Dame. Just look at us and say, okay, we have our starting cornerback and Tyson Campbell out. We lose
Stokes goes out.
We lose Eric Stokes. So now we have Tyreek McGee, who hasn't played hardly at all this year. The kid's a senior, and he's just lost on the depth chart because we're so talented. Now he's thrown into action as a cornerback.
Mostly a safety. Most of his reps come as safety star, too.
So now we're down 2 cornerbacks. We're down 2 offensive linemen, which we're deep. It's just there's just all these things where it's not ideal. They're playing very well. They're playing their A+ game. We're taking blows as far as injuries go. It's a frustrating game. And then on top of that, obviously horrible special teams play. You have the fumble, which is, absolutely awful by Tyler Simmons. If you notice in the second half, he did not return a single punt after that. It was all Don Blaylock, who is a true freshman, mind you.
Yeah.
And then obviously Jake Camarda, my God, when the punt seems to matter, the kid can boom it. I know
he's got the yips. He averages last year.
Yeah, he averages 50 yards a punt, and he just crushes. He's got a hell of a leg. Last year he could punt it out of the freaking stadium, but he couldn't place it. And it's when the game matters. I think there was one in LSU as well. It's when it matters to flip the field, he seems to get the yips, as Jimmy just said. It gets in his head. Unfortunately, the crowd and the environment gets in our own punter's head, and Notre Dame was the one that we kind of called out last week or 2 weeks ago that I've also read about, that they were the ones with the bad punting and the horrible punting that averaged 30-something yards a punt with not good punt coverage. And it ended up being our special teams that really cost us a whole lot of field position. So, all that being said, really good up to our defense for the game they played. I thought our defense played amazing.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into that because I wanted to address the Georgia defense next. So perfect segue. Talking about the havoc, or I guess
Lack of havoc.
lack thereof. I mean, out of the entire game, right? Notre Dame ran 61 plays, and only 9 of those would officially qualify as a havoc play. Didn't have any sacks, and there was basically, I think there was 3 tackles for a loss, and that was a grand total of 4 yards. So, I mean, it didn't seem like we were spending a whole lot of time in the backfield. And Ian Book, we all knew coming into this game that he had legs, which surprisingly, he didn't really do much on his legs. I mean, he extended plays, but it wasn't like he was tearing apart. You know,
He threw the ball like 48 times or something. I mean, he threw he threw a ton.
It was over 40, I know.
Yeah.
Didn't have a super great completion percentage, but for what it's worth, he extended the plays. But we just didn't get to him that often. We weren't spending a lot of time in that backfield.
I was okay with that, though. I think we said last week that we expected to see a drop-off in havoc just schematically because we tend to dial it back a little bit and focus more on keeping him in the pocket. And other than a few like key third down, I will say he that kid is a player, and he made some really good plays on some big third downs that if I was a Notre Dame fan, I obviously would have been pretty fired up about. But for the most part, we held him in check with his legs, and I think he averaged like 4.2 yards per attempt or something like that. We're also down 2 corners, so we're going to be a lot. The whole reason we talked about last year havoc was not there is because Kirby didn't trust the secondary in one-on-one coverage enough to send enough guys that you need to be in one-on-one. And what do? Is we lose immediately our 2 starting corners.
True.
So I think that could have messed up the game plan to begin with. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the havoc is fun, but we basically allowed 10 points, and because I'm not going to count the short field they got on the muff punt. That wasn't really on the defense. And then, I mean, their last touchdown was kind of in a hurry up. We were in kind of a prevent because I think we were willing to give up chunk plays as long as it kept the clock running because we knew they had to score 2 touchdowns. So I think Kirby, again, love him or hate him, he's ultra conservative. He'll always take a win by 1 score. He doesn't care about style points. He doesn't care if it's pretty. So he was very willing to let them march down the field, bleed the clock, and then tighten it up in the second series, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's despite not having those havoc plays, I mean, and being down the 2 cornerbacks, there were still 2 big interceptions that took place. I think J.R. Reed and Devod Wilson.
That was athletic, yeah.
Huge. And, I mean, that goes a long way towards keeping your team both mentally in the game and obviously on the board. Side note, Book was running with a streak of 80 pass attempts without a pick. Really? So that brought that to an end there.
Very nice.
So, I mean, yeah, huge for those guys to step up and make a statement on defense there, despite us not having a lot of those havoc plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy nailed us schematically. That was what we wanted to do. We wanted to keep Ian Book in front of us. College football, I've always said this, is littered with the landscape of the mobile quarterback that just tears teams up no matter how good your defense is. You've seen the Johnny Manziels who have played someone like Alabama and just perfect defense, and then your defense can't defend for that long. The kid just breaks it down and takes off. Ian Book, we saw, clearly has the athletic ability to do so. We didn't get a sack on him. Very elusive, great pocket presence, could push the ball downfield. I mean, Commence, whatever the tight end is, number 84.
Kid,
Cole.
He tore. So, I mean, he got the ball out to those guys and they made some plays. But, I mean, hats off to the defense for slinging the ball that many times to only allowing 2 touchdowns. That's incredible. I mean, my hat can't go off enough to the secondary for really, eliminating that and getting those turnovers. And also, I know Kirby, this doesn't count as havoc, but Kirby considers false starts a tackle for a loss. Essentially, they keep the down distance, but you get 5
yards. So the crowd
yards.
had several havoc plays.
Oh yeah, so the
6
crowd. I mean,
shout out to us.
And maybe we can even get into this a little bit. The crowd was incredible. I mean, it's the loudest I've ever been to in a game, I think. I've never heard a stadium that loud.
Could you imagine what our stadium would sound like if we didn't have the opening in the end?
But I do like having it.
I mean, no, trust me, I love that. But I would love to see like what that decibel difference would be like, and it was just
that would be interesting.
Insane.
I think the only single play I've ever heard that came close to how loud our stadium was the entire night was that I've seen personally was the 4th and 10 against LSU in 2013. To end the game. Zach Mettenberger threw an incompletion, and that sealed the game. But, I mean, it was that loud, well over 100 decibels from literally the first series.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
I mean, there was
cool.
a series Notre Dame had the ball in the 3rd quarter where they had 2 false starts and a timeout.
Yeah.
And that was huge later on. I mean, they blew 2 timeouts really early in the second half that they really could have used on that last series.
Yeah, Kirby was heaping praise on the atmosphere. He said, those 2 timeouts keep them from getting. And if we go out there and throw a funky personnel mismatch out there, they can't do anything about it because they've had to burn 2 timeouts because they can't hear. Yeah. They can't hear because you're yelling your ass off in that stand. Like that is, if that doesn't fire, I'm gonna get chill bumps. If that doesn't fire you up to literally just get into it every single game, that is why you play home games. That's why LSU at night has that rep. That's why Tuscaloosa has that rep. Like they have this, They have those. Having a brain fart. That's what they're known for. That's why you want to play home games. It's incredible. That's with the home field advantage. I know Georgia gets a bad rap for maybe having some older, like Jimmy referenced, the wine and cheese crowd that doesn't really want to wear the black jerseys and get have too late of a night game because they got to get home late. But like that was an electric atmosphere, and recruits were eating that up. So, but just sticking with the defense, that was huge. So. And then hats off to, I thought Tay Crowder and Monty Rice did a great job also eliminating, their perimeter stuff.
Tay Crowder was the leading tackler.
Yeah, with all of theirs. I mean, just with as much as we couldn't do on offense and as frustrated as we were, they could not do a damn thing until it was 2-minute drill with 7 minutes left in the game.
And again, I think that was by design on our part.
Yeah,
I think we were willing to give up plays, let them march as long as it was in bounds.
So and granted, Notre Dame was also missing some players. I think 2 of their running backs were hurt. Their top 2 guys were out. Jafar, I can't remember his name, Armstrong or something like that, he was injured as well. He got injured pretty early or late in the week, I think, that got him pulled from starting. So give Notre Dame for also planning around their inefficiencies and making it such a game.
One thing I will say about Notre Dame, which it's a compliment to Brian Kelly, I guess, but then I think it's another thing that is impressive for Georgia. Looking back on the stats and how they played against New Mexico State last week, I have a conspiracy theory that they did not watch 1 second of film, did not practice 1 second for New Mexico State. They were practicing for Georgia for 2 straight weeks, and they just said, just go out there and just be better than them. And I think, when you look at their players that had big statistics against New Mexico State, it was nobody that played well against Georgia. So I think they were putting a lot of stuff on film that was just...
That's funny, because
was just smoke and mirrors.
I remember reading this. They rotated like 3 or 4 deep with the linebacker for that game.
Because the entire game was smoke and mirrors for Georgia.
Brian Kelly did say they were just trying to find out who were their settled linebackers, but I think if you look at that Georgia game, I think he knows damn well who our starting linebackers are. I mean, because seriously, coming in, I know you guys watching it at home saw the stat on when they flashed it pretty early. Notre Dame, let me go ahead and tell you, there's 127 teams in FBS. Notre Dame has 120th ranked rush defense. Okay, we have the number 7 rush offense in the country. How in no way, shape, or form should we be held to 150-something yards rushing on 31 attempts, with those stats. But that goes to show, like Jimmy said, you're kind of making me believe it as well because those stats just don't add up. New Mexico State, whoever the hell it was nowhere near the talent that our offensive line is, our running backs, anything to that effect. Our coaching, none of it. And Notre Dame, hats off, made it and those boys are hitting too. They made it a knockout. I mean, because my brother, he's an Auburn fan. He watched the Auburn. He watched the Auburn A&M game. He was like, "Yeah, A&M's kind of soft. It wasn't really that fun of a game." Flipped it over to y'all's game, and y'all were like knocking people out. Both of y'all, Notre Dame and Georgia, were just like super physical. It was like y'all look like men out there.
Well,
like
Brian Kelly made a comment that was the most physical game that he's ever had to coach in.
We are lucky we have a bye this week. I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame play. I think they'll beat Virginia. I think they have a really good chance to go on 11-1. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have a really letdown game against Virginia and sort of squeak by Virginia next week.
Yeah, I think that
this coming Saturday.
Yeah, just the environment that they were in, the physical toll that it probably took on a lot of those players. I think that's a really good point that I think they're really going to struggle and they need to stay healthy. But it's really interesting that you brought up about their preparation for this game. That's something I hadn't thought about.
Well, and that tight end Kmet, he had like 108 yards against us, and I think he had like 1 catch for 14 yards.
He was injured.
Season. Oh, he was injured.
Yeah, this is his first game back.
No, he was pretend injured.
Let's
see how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Tied a Notre Dame record for receptions. I think it was just specifically for the tight end position. He had 9 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown.
He tied his career high of 4 in the first quarter. 4 receptions. That was his career high in a single game.
Dude, he was.
Yeah. I think that's good coaching
fits
by Kelly to say, and he spotted a mismatch because as good as Tay Crowder is as a run stopper, he's not our best linebacker in coverage, and they were getting him matched up on Tay a lot. And he was beating Tay. I mean, Tay, he had a really good first half, and then we started shading over J.R. Reed to him a little bit, and he had a worse second half than first half. We didn't shut him down completely, obviously, but I think he got 80 of his 115 yards in the first half. So
yeah.
Kirby may not be the world's best on-field coach, but he's a hell of a halftime
Yeah,
adjuster.
he is. I mean, look at the Rose Bowl. Look at everything else we've had to come back and win. He's
We need a coach specifically to decide whether or not we should run fake punts. Just take that out of Kirby's hands.
We're learning. I mean, and that's a good
that.
point. We are going through Kirby's lumps, and it's frustrating because here we are starting off year 4, but we're going through this, and we're still having to deal with Kirby saying, and it was James Coley, new offensive coordinator's first time calling plays in a big game. I hate falling back to those excuses because other coaches around the country look how well their teams are looking. And I think we're all a little worried about how Notre Dame's going to look style points wise versus someone like Virginia next week, maybe. But, I'm not upset with Kirby by any means. I wish we had the style points on a big stage like that. The world was watching. You'll want to see it, But I'm not unhappy with the win.
I definitely have stepped off the ledge more than when you and I were sitting there after the game. We were like, if you had looked over at like me and Cole and Alan and Tyler talking to each other after the game, you would have thought Georgia lost. If somebody dropped you in there. And
I think a lot of it was almost like a relief, like we got out of this. Like thank goodness. I felt like we escaped because like when Ian Book rolled out at the very end and slung that thing in the air, I feel like it got super quiet.
Shades of 2013 Auburn.
It reminded me of Josh Dobbs in Athens.
Yeah.
He just slung that thing, and I was like, I didn't even watch the field. I was just watching that ball. I was hanging in the air forever.
Yeah.
And it finally came down into double coverage, but that was scary. And I think that's the biggest thing. It came down to that play, and it felt like we couldn't control it offensively to do anything. We could trust our defense that played, I'm going to argue, elite almost in the entire game.
Yeah. Well, dominated Notre Dame. Kept them from running. I think they had 14 rushing attempts.
They had like 65 yards rushing,
46 yards total, and Book had 18 of those.
That's incredible.
Through an entire game. So, that's pretty unfreaking believable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was also difficult watching Book sit back there and complete passes that were just like, geez.
But that's what Kirby does, the way he plays defense, is he identifies what he believes you do best, and then he sells out to stop that and makes you beat him kind of left-handed. And, Book played probably a lot better game than even the coaching staff expected. I bet behind closed doors the coaches would be like, we did not know Book was that good of a throwing quarterback.
Sure.
Like, we thought that if we just took away his run game, he would fold. And he was resilient. I don't want to say he had like a great game because he had a pretty low yards per attempt, but Kelly obviously believed in him enough to let him throw the ball 48 times.
Yeah, I remember reading and saying last 2 weeks ago, like he would have to have his best game to beat us. And I remember when that first quarter ended, granted it was still 0-0, I was thinking, I haven't watched much of Notre Dame, but from what I've watched and from what I'm observing on this field, this kid's probably playing, he's putting together so far one of his best games. It's funny because people say the same thing about Jake Fromm this game too. Went 20 for 26, 180-something yards. Neither of them have sexy stats, really great stats. 20 of 26 sounds nice completion-wise, but both were very kind of handcuffed, it appears, and just played within the limits that they had to do, and they didn't put them teams in a bad position. If you give it to Ian Book, we're going to love to tout the interception, the 2 interceptions we got, but that one was off the kid's hands. It could have been a better throw, but the kid didn't reel it in. We bobbled up. We got lucky. Say what you want about it. It wasn't like it was a horrible errant throw. And then the other play was really, I would call a pressure pick because we flushed him outside. He had to throw it up against J.R. Reed, who was able to cut under. I think it was Chase Claypool and make that awesome interception. So, Book was putting himself in position to do what he absolutely had to do. Granted, he would probably rather have the tackle for a loss or a sack rather than that interception. But he surprised me. The kid was, like Jimmy said, he slung that ball pretty well. I was pretty impressed with actually how pure of a passer he looked, considering how athletic he is known to be with his legs.
Yeah. He looked like the real deal out there. I don't think that anybody would say that was a fluke performance by any means.
Do you know what year is Book?
I think he's a junior.
Is he a junior? Because I don't feel like he's the kind of guy whose skill set's going to send him to the NFL early.
No.
So, as long as we, up until if we happen to play them in the playoffs in future years, I'll watch Notre Dame root for Book.
I know he was behind Brandon Wimbush, and he overtook Brandon Wimbush after week 4 of last year, I think. Okay. And now Wimbush is at UCF, if I'm not mistaken.
Is he?
Mm-hmm. So, this was, for Ian Book, this was week 12.
Of being a starter?
Being a starter, yeah.
Yeah. That is one thing I will say going way back to talking about how Clemson just dismantled Notre Dame. I think an offseason adds a lot to a quarterback in terms of leadership, understanding the offense and all that. So you can say what you want about, it was week 14. He'd been the starter for 10 weeks. We're playing him when he has an entire offseason to, learn the offense and stuff like that. So
what about Jake Fromm and you said the same thing about us.
We didn't let him throw the ball, though. I mean, at a certain point, Jake Fromm, the coaches trust him enough, and he's not big-headed enough that he's gonna audible into a run if that's what the defense gives him.
Do you want to see that though? I mean, we can have this conversation.
I want to win.
We're not gonna. I mean, we can say this: we're not gonna win playing like that versus Alabama, versus Clemson, versus LSU. We're not going to win like that. And I know it's hard. It's just like anything else in life. The comparison game is a thief of joy. I understand that. And be happy with what we got. We got a top 10 win. We're 4-0. We're marching. We'll get better. I mean, I don't need to remind anybody. Look at Clemson last year, barely beat Syracuse, and then wiped the floor with Bama at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, the years of the national champions are littered with games they had to escape by teams that were lesser than, and they won. And it's games that people have been saying, a gut check. And thank goodness maybe this is our gut check against a top 10 team at home like that. Like, that's not a bad way to kind of wake your team. If that's the wake up our team needs.
It's not Mississippi State or Pitt.
Yeah, I'll take that every year. It's not Syracuse, So people aren't really doubting us like they might doubt Clemson when they had barely squeaked by Syracuse. So I understand that. It's just you want to see Fromm almost take – you're a junior. You might leave. Do you don't? I don't really care at this point. I just want to win, like Jimmy said. But I would like to have the confidence of a junior gunslinger to go out there and, okay, no, coach, I know you gave me this, but I'm going to put the 4 wide out there and empty. I didn't think that's what I frustrated with was the personnel and Jake not taking that over. I thought we came out with bunch formation a lot, which for a lot of you listening who you don't know is when either your tight ends or your wide receivers are played in a bunch set really close to the line of scrimmage, really close to your offensive lineman, which then in return is either going to be a short route that a defensive back can jump, so it's kind of dangerous for a pick, or it's going to be a very long developing route for that player to get open downfield. That to me wasn't conducive to having an open box. You're putting more men closer to your running backs, closer to what you do best. So why not have Jake almost kind of, I'm going to give my running backs a lot more friendlier and my offensive line a lot more friendlier of a look this whole game. I guess I want to see a little more of that from him. I understand the coaches are going to do this and they might handcuff, but like as a junior that might leave and might be ready for the NFL and be heading that direction with the weapons that we've seen in those first 3 weeks, albeit versus lesser competition. I'd rather see him be trusted or him take over a little more because you learn when we're going to want him and need him to do that versus better opponents.
I agree with that.
I want to see that now when it's at home, not on the road versus Auburn, not in Atlanta versus whomever it may be in the West. I want us to kind of start to see that now.
There's a lot of games between those games you just named and now, though, because I think you will see him do that a little bit with Tennessee, a little bit with South Carolina, and with Kentucky and the teams out there that we feel like we can go out there and let Jake check into something even if it's a mistake. Let George Pickens try and go up and get a 50-50 ball even if he doesn't get it. I just think that the entire offense was a little handcuffed, for lack of a better word, by Kirby's mentality in this game. That he was like, this is not the game to get cute, to let these guys bust on the stage, to let these guys, take their lumps. It's like, we're going to only do what we're good at, and we're going to get out of here with a win, and then we have basically until Florida before anybody really is going to challenge us too much, and 2 bye weeks.
It's tough to be patient because we've seen Saban grow out of that. Look at what Alabama's offense back in the day. It was just that. It was run down your throat, power eye, boring vanilla, win 28-13 games, right? And I don't think no one will ever be Saban. No one will ever surpass that Bama dynasty of being ranked 200-something odd weeks in a row. Whatever. I understand that. We're just trying to win a championship. We're just a game at a time, get to New Orleans this year and win the damn thing. But you want to see in the day and age of all these athletes and how well we're recruiting, you want to see us start to kind of move that way too. And I think, maybe this is me checking myself, with how accelerated our growth has been with Kirby, I want to see that on the field as well, not just where our program and how well it's marketed and where we're in the conversation. I want to see that development happen on the field very rapidly too, because it's going to be a while again, unfortunately, until you have the comfortability, I guess, or the comfort of a quarterback like Jake Fromm, who's going to be there for 3, maybe 4 years. So I get it. Do what you have to do, get the W. You don't have to please me to get style points for us to win. I'm still going to enjoy the win, enjoy the season, and we can look back and laugh at all this conversation. I guess I just see, yes, it's week 4, but I see all those other games that Jake Fromm has started throughout his career so far as those are the games that got you ready. That Sugar Bowl, that Rose Bowl, that SEC Championship, that Auburn game, that game at LSU. Those were all the games where we've learned and had to put him in those situations to really make a tough decision. This is another example to do that, but at home in a friendlier confine with what we can say is better weapons and offensive line. So that's just what I'm still in the Jake Fromm fan club. He's still my guy. I still think he can do it. I just would love to see him step up on that stage to show, okay, that's what we're looking for, and that's moving in the right direction of when we do play name X team from the West.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess so we can revisit this in a few weeks. I think we're going to cut him loose up until maybe Auburn. We might go back to this whole Notre Dame mentality of just get out with the win. But I think we feel pretty comfortable that we can make mistakes along the way and still comfortably beat the next 5 teams on our schedule. So I think we're going to see it. Jake Fromm get to throw the ball more than he has in Knoxville, if I had to guess.
I think we will. And that kind of falls, it's not fair for me to say that falls into the lesser teams. Those are conference wins. Those are division wins. Those are big. We need those, and on the road, too. Tennessee's going to give us their best shot. They're defeated, they're kicked, but they would love nothing more than to make their season by knocking us off. That would be sweet for them. So I understand that. And I want to see Jake Fromm do it there, too, obviously. I just want to see him do it versus, quote-unquote, respected competition, which I'm not diminishing Jake Fromm's impact on the game. I know he goes up to the line of scrimmage and puts us in the right thing and the most optimal thing. I understand he has IQ of the game, which has been, he's high football IQ. That's what he's been known for since coming out of Houston County. I'm not diminishing that. It just doesn't look as sexy on TV when you're looking for that leader to go in there and say, okay, this isn't working on the ground. I'm about to, run him. Like Aaron Murray had some of that in him,
Yeah.
He just, I forget what game was it, Tennessee?
Aaron Murray didn't have the offensive line in the run game that Jake Fromm
But he
has,
just said, to hell with this, I'm going to go down and win. And Kirby's probably we're never going to have that. We're having that Nick Saban mentality where I said at the beginning of the year, we're not going to have that one superstar. It's going to be a team effort. And so far it has been. We've spread the ball out amongst a whole bunch of receivers and running backs to get it done. You want to have something okay, we can fall back on this guy to get us out of this situation.
I think you just want him to play like Justin Fields is playing right now.
No, I don't care. I don't know who that is.
They ain't played nobody.
Yeah, I saw Justin Fields play in that uniform.
I think that
I don't need to see that again.
I think that Swift is our guy right now in that context.
Yeah,
of who are we going to put the ball in his hands, or maybe Rodrigo Blankenship, because when the game was on the line, that's who we put the game. That's who we put the ball.
It does feel like Hot Rod, and really props to Hot Rod. I mean, my goodness, that kid is
10 points
guaranteed
automatic
clutch.
Yeah.
More than 10 points.
11, right?
Matt Bryant
11 points, three field goals and 2 extra points.
There you go. Yeah, that's MVP right there.
Awesome. Well, I do want to get to one last thing before we kind of wrap things up, and we can't let this discussion go without talking a little bit of controversy, because there was certainly a little bit of it on the field. And I think everybody knows what I'm referring to, and that is the faked injuries. And yes, they were 100% faked by Notre Dame. This was one of the things that somebody commented on my post that I was asking about, how you were treated, and somebody was like, I just thought it was so disrespectful of all those Georgia fans to be booing this young man who's out there and clearly injured. And I was like, dude, if you, I don't know, maybe you weren't paying attention to anything and didn't look into this after the fact and just saw it from your 600 level seats, but that could not have
shots fired.
That could not have been a more blatant, flagrant faking of an injury.
Yeah, I wish your brother was here too.
I would have to imagine he would agree. If he doesn't, he's delusional.
The argument I have seen reading online is, so I was way too far away to see.
And Kelly doubled down on it. I'm sure you saw that. He's like, oh, no, that was totally an injury.
I missed the fake. I saw them laying down the booing. I did not boo. I
try not to boo athletes or college kids, especially for injuries.
Never know.
The argument I've seen by them is that he basically got his bell rung so hard 2 plays earlier that he was on the field for the play before he went down and didn't even know where he was and was just wandering around glassy-eyed, and that's when
just needed somebody to pull him down to the ground.
That's when his teammate forced him to go down.
Interesting.
Well, I would love to see if we substituted at all before those 2 plays, because if you substitute the offense, the defense has a right of way to substitute as well. So I wonder if that argument holds up for someone who's actually paying attention. Not to call out the person who posted that Jimmy read, but I'd be curious to go back and see if there was a chance to substitute. If we can call
it just
BS
felt,
on that.
I think Tyler and I had similar seats a little ways away from each other. I did not have the sight. I was nowhere near close enough to actually look at him and be like, oh, this guy's fine. But
you saw it after, right?
Yeah, and it was just so convenient. The timing of it is
that's called faking.
Yeah, after the first one,
that's what I think we can come right out and say that that's just faking.
After the first one, the refs probably could have gone to Kelly Bryant, not Kelly Bryant.
Brian Kelly,
not the quarterback of Missouri, and said, hey, that was questionable. So if that happens again, we're going to charge you a penalty or dock you a timeout, or I don't even know what the
NFL docks you a timeout to
they?
prevent that. Not
For
that's more
flopping.
money driven.
going to give them a technical.
If for any injury in the NFL, they give you a charge you a timeout. They just make you take a timeout there essentially to reassess or to do anything. So that would be nice. And you do get a fourth timeout. There's actually a fourth timeout in the Falcons-Eagles game.
I saw that. It was bizarre.
There's an injury timeout?
Yeah, if the player gets injured, you get an additional because you can't take any more.
Right.
So they will do it obviously if the person's hurt.
You know what? Speaking of BS timeouts, one thing that I think did help Notre Dame and hinder Georgia. So if it had not been a CBS game, maybe we would have won by more. But with those TV timeouts, kind of really, they were just so many and so often.
It's known for.
I think they kind of took a little bit of the. I mean, the crowd stayed really, really into it. But there were some times where we had a lot of momentum, and then all of a sudden, this guy runs out with this little clock that says 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah,
and we're just kind of looking around. So I don't like watching games on CBS.
Sure, yeah, it take a while for sure. It's long, but back to the fake injuries and to wrap it up. I like Jimmy said, I really get to see it. I haven't actually rewatched the second half yet to pay attention to that piece of it to see them how egregious it was. I guess that's aggravating for sure, and it stops your momentum. But did we still do enough coming right back out of it, because we get a break too. Granted, it's aggravating for them to sub, and kind of slow us down and stop our momentum. But I'm more aggravated at the fact that we just couldn't do what we're best at and what we expect us to do against any competition, just because of how well we've recruited. So as much as we can hang on that, I'm pretty critical. I'm our harshest critic as far as we can complain about that, but we still are in charge of what we can execute and what we can do. So
sure. I mean, I agree. I don't think anybody would look at that game and think that everything's on the up and up. I think there's definitely screws that need to be tightened, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I just think it's hard to let that go, particularly when you have. I mean, I guess what are you going to do? If you're the head coach of that team, of course you're going to have to defend your players.
Sure.
You're not going to come out and be like, I don't know.
You throw the kid under the bus, and he's public enemy number one.
Right. So I mean, of course, Brian Kelly's not going to come out and say anything. But at the same time, he was clearly taking directives from the sideline. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And, the second one where he went down, he's holding his leg and then comes off, and the first thing he gets is eye drops. It's like, I didn't realize
he got something in his eye.
Yeah, I didn't realize that,
that was some trainer thinking pretty quick.
Those two things were related. So
and the second guy got his feelings hurt, I think. Well, he went out, yeah. His feelings were hurt.
I mean, to me, it's just, I don't know, maybe because I'm on a soapbox, but it's there's just not a place in the game for that. You're out there to play. If you're injured, then go down. But if you're not, you don't want them to keep running and play tempo and stop them.
Sure.
I mean, that's,
I mean, we would do it.
I guess
allow
coaches,
7 points.
Coaches are gonna exploit that until the refs stop it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and I don't know that there is a real way to stop it, because what are you going to do? Start speculating injuries now that, especially that's in such a spotlight, particularly for these kids. There's no way they're going to be able to.
The only thing
crack
I
down
could
on
think
that.
of is, instead of forcing them to stay out the next play, which is the rule now, maybe say they have to stay out the rest of the series if they come out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's in a dicey territory. I don't know that there is a great fix.
We'll brainstorm it. We'll have a solution by next week.
That's tough.
We'll tweet it to NCAA.
Speaking of which, it was funny. I did bring the camera down. We got some what we thought at the time were hot takes, and turned out to be freezing cold because so many of us were completely off. But I'm going to try and splice those.
I thought I had a good point.
Was there a bunch about how we're just going to destroy them and run away? Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll try and splice those together and put them on our YouTube channel. Or
and we can all laugh.
I have a text between one of my coworkers. Shout out to Tammy, who definitely does not listen to the podcast. But let me see.
Tammy sounds like she would be big American Pylon.
She loves the dogs. I just don't think she listens to it. But she said, WTH, I'm dying at halftime. And she said, do your part. We need some help. And I said, be patient. They're playing our game. They can't hang with us late. 31-14 final. So that was a cold take by me.
I did 34-17, so I wasn't too far off. I believe too much in our offense, so that was nice. And I said the one thing would, if we can get penetration up front with our defensive line, but if we can manufacture pressure with our front four, we would dominate the game. And we just played it comfortable. Didn't get after him. Made him wing it out all night. So I feel pretty good with mine. I mean, I didn't, I went over, but I feel good with
also
mailing their score.
Could have, and 7 of their points where you're never going to predict a fluky muffed punt by a senior punt returner early in the first quarter. So
true.
Basically, we were right.
Oh, I will touch base on
Georgia
that.
covered in our hearts.
I can touch base on that. I did think they out-schemed us horribly. They out-coached us very well, I should say, on their end. Brian Kelly, we had to call a timeout right before they threw that first touchdown that was called back. Kirby was running on the field as fast as he could, called a timeout because they saw a big mismatch. They get the, I guess, another play or two later, Brian Kelly trots out a certain formation, and then Ian Book claps the hands, calls an audible essentially, and they fan out to have 4 wide, and then they basically he used our youth against us. I think he knew maybe pound for pound Joe versus Joe that we had the talent margin there. So he said, okay, well, what can I do? I can trot out a certain look, switch it up before the snap, and then go. And then that would confuse their youth. So that's how I can take advantage of this crowd noise, their youth. I'm not going to be able to get a leg up on them. So I really thought Brian Kelly did a great job with that short field position, knowing that we had those big bodies and lengthy secondary in there to really confuse. Because Aziz Ojulari is the one that got lost on that play.
Really?
That allowed actually number 6 to get wide open in the end zone, who Ian Book was throwing to. And then that Kemp guy or whatever, 84, caught the touchdown. But I thought if you go back and watch that series when we do fumble and then what Brian Kelly was doing to keep Kirby just on his heels, I mean, that was some really good chess match coaching there. So hats off to them. That was impressive. I say all that because that's where our talent is amazing. I think that's the only thing he could do was out scheme, and if the scheme didn't work, you weren't going to have anything else. And it took him 6 plays to score from the 8-yard line. So huge takeaways there from how tough it was for them to score even in favorable position like that. So that's one last piece I wanted to say that I observed that I wanted to put on anyone's radar that's still listening.
True. Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 ways to look at this as we wrap up, and there's the bright side. Notre Dame only got those 7 points because of a muff punt, and then if not for Georgia missing some of those other opportunities, I think it could have certainly been a blowout. And then of course on the defensive side, we're missing the 2 cornerbacks, and so there's a lot of injuries that factor into that. But if you're looking on a purely realistic and purely, I guess, from an agnostic point of view, Notre Dame also left opportunities on the board as well, and they killed themselves with penalties. I mean, I think they also had 100 yards in penalties, and they also gave Georgia the ball at its own 22. So I think there's a couple different ways to look at it, but I am certainly encouraged with the way that they performed on that stage. I think that having some time to take a step back and reevaluate it wasn't all doom and gloom just because we thought it was going to be a blowout. So I'm certainly excited to see the way the rest of the season goes and this next stretch of games. So, yeah, anything else you guys want to add before we sign off here? I think we covered quite a bit today.
Yeah,
just got to get healthy. Got to get healthy in the bye week.
Not a bye week, a work week. That's what Kirby calls it.
There you go.
Got to get healthy.
Awesome. Well, from all of us here to everybody out there, we want to say thank you for joining and listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. But once again, thanks for listening, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.